Hey everyone, Sam from the Danger Planet here, and today we're going to be talking about Horus Heresy with our buddies Brady and Mike. Brady, Mike, say hi.
How you guys all doing?
Hey, glad to be back.
And today we're going to be talking about the Third Legion of Astartes, the Emperor's Children. All right, guys. So today we've already covered the Sons of Horus. We've covered the Imperial Fists. So now we're going to be going back to the traitors, and we're going to be talking about the Emperor's Children. So this is a classic Chaos Legion. Doesn't get more classic than this. They're one of what we call the cult legions, dedicated to the dark god Slanesh. But they're one of the earliest legions to turn traitor, and their Primarch Fulgrim is one of Horus's closest allies. So Brady, what's your impression of the Emperor's Children, just from like a very high level perspective? What are the themes when you're playing this army?
So the Emperor, it's Slanesh, so it's all about like that excess, and you see that in the two like special unique things of the Sonic, and you see all those like surgical augmentations. So you see like that Fabius bile starting to creep in. And what you also see is like what the influence that the Emperor had given, why they were the Emperor's children. That idea of perfection, which has been part of Slanesh, and it was kind of taken away, as lore progressed. But you see that idea of we are going to be the finest warriors, and that's going to be through martial prowess in actual hand-to-hand combat, through just better initiatives a lot of times, and then you're also going to see that like really nasty, gnarly, augmented sonic weaponry that is, that pinning and a lot of just grotesque monsters.
Yeah, I have to say for me, you're definitely hitting a strong point on the perfection, and they bring a lot of tactical flexibility to that. So when you kind of look through and read the Black Library Horus Heresy Fulgrim book, not the Primarch book, the Horus Heresy book, it gives a great explanation of how these guys fight and why they fight the way that they do. That constant search for perfection, which easily leads them into that excess with Slanesh. And then you can see on the tabletop how they kind of still strive to reach that, having some very strong units with some very unique additions like the Sonic Shriekers, their Phoenix Spears, and I think they have honestly one of the better units in the game, which we'll get to when we start talking about units.
Yeah, these guys are definitely the absolute embodiment of pride goeth before a fall. And I really like also they've been some of the first Legion to get new sculpted Praetors with second edition. And these new Praetors just look really gorgeous. And what I really like about them is that they've got this very sort of clean aesthetic. They're not dripping with chaos mutation or anything. But if you look closely, there's a lot of little hints there that these guys are maybe tilting towards Slanesh or even already fallen. Little iconography on the models, so they're really gorgeous. If you really like painting and modeling, I think the Emperor's Children are a really good choice for you as well, because they've got this really bright purple color accented with gold that really pops on the tabletop. So without further ado, we're going to just get into how they play, and we're going to start with their unique special rule, Flawless Execution. This says that whenever they charge, even if it's a disordered charge, they make their attacks at one initiative step higher. And for vehicles who don't charge, they get a bonus of +1 to all their to hit rolls with their defensive weapons when they shoot with a reaction. So Mike, can you tell us a little bit about how this affects how the Emperor's Children play on the tabletop, and what kinds of lists you take with them?
So right at the gate, it's already a strong Legion ability. +1 initiative is great. It means a lot of their basic units are going to be fighting first before other basic units. Their elite units are going to be fighting first above other elite units just out the gate. And if you look at a lot of the different abilities that this army has, different war gear and the units, they are going to be able to compound this rule. You're going to get a lot of high initiative, and you're going to be striking very quickly and very fast against just about everybody else. You will most likely be striking first in combat, and you're going to want to be centering your force around one knockout punch, so to speak, and getting all your guys into combat, getting that strikeout, and then just bullying people into the dirt with you being faster and in some cases stronger.
This is one of those Legion traits that, like a lot of the combat ones, are inherently harder to just leverage all the power from it. And this is probably the quintessential example of it is so powerful to swing at one initiative higher. You know, your power fists will swing before their power fists, so your Terminators should almost always be killing whatever Terminator they're going into. However, again, it only comes into play when you make the charge. So I think like the difference between two different Emperor's Children's generals in terms of skill level will really come into play on that person who is able to leverage and make sure they get all their important charges off and don't make reckless positioning mistakes and just not get this rule to activate ever because they're getting charged or they're failing their charges.
So it sounds like flawless execution means you need to be, as the player, flawlessly executing when you're playing them. But we'll talk about their reaction now. The perfect counter. Perfect, flawless. Look at this. These guys are really full of themselves. Their advanced reaction, the perfect counter, happens during the enemy's assault phase when they charge you. When they roll for their charge, you also roll. And if you beat them, instead of them charging you, you charge them. That's pretty great. And even if you don't beat them, you have the consolation prize that you can basically still overwatch them. So it seems like a pretty strong reaction, even given that there's no chance of it all the way failing. Brady, how does that affect the way the Emperor's Children play out?
You really need to make sure when you're charging them, especially if it's like a strong melee unit that you're, throwing into them, that you roll well. And you can't do much to roll better on a 2d6, but you really want to make sure that you can take that counter hit. And the one way you can maybe get around it as opponent going against it, or you as the person using it, is bait them into charging things that also have really good shooting. Because if you fail, you still get to shoot, but if you only have like a handful of bolters, your opponent isn't going to be afraid of that. But if they're charging something with a lot of sonic cannons or maybe like combi meltas, they're gonna really think twice because it's just a rock in a hard place.
Yeah, I definitely feel, honestly, this is one of my favorite reactions in the game thus far that I've really gotten a chance to look at and analyze. Mostly because, as you said, you get a consolation prize. So no matter what, you're going to get something out of this reaction, whether it be an Overwatch or that counter charge, which we already know from talking about Imperial Fist. It's just game changing. So if you get that counter charge off, it's going to be huge. It's going to be very game changing, and a lot of the units in Emperor's Children are going to really benefit from getting into combat. But if you make the mistake of saying charging a Kakophoni Squad, that Overwatch is still going to hurt. It's still going to be devastating. For me, I would try to charge units that don't have a good Overwatch so that consolation prize isn't as good. But this really is one of my favorite. When you look at the Imperial Fists, they get to charge you on a D6 plus initiative. So max they can really do is 10. These guys still get their full charge. And if they miss, they still get a chance to do some damage.
So these guys have something that not every Legion has, which is a Warlord trait that's loyal only and a Warlord trait that's traitor only. So we've got the Broken Mirror for traitors and Martyrs of Eastvaun for loyalists. And of course, there's Paragon of Excellence, which is agnostic for either side. And these Warlord traits seem kind of cool, but which of them are really strong traits that are really going to define the way your army plays? And which ones do you think you'll use often? And also, do you think these Warlord traits will push you more towards playing as a loyalist or a traitor? What do you think, Mike?
So this is one of those things I love about Heresy, is the ability to play to the narrative, to the fluff of your Legion. And this is a great example of it because you can play Isstvan 3, and you get to have the option of Loyalist Traitor, as you said. Personally, I really like Saul Tarvitz, so if I was playing this, I would do Mars Isstvan because I would want to play the Loyalist version. But honestly, you're not missing out with Broken Mirror. Being able to just lose a wound, very chaosy in my opinion, but lose a wound and still continue on and just pass that morale check that you failed is kind of a big deal in my opinion. And with things being kind of more survivable in this edition, that's really strong. But for me, I will have to do Martyrs just because I'd have to play my boy Tarvitz.
So I love the idea of running those like small loyalist forces, but I gotta say the broken mirror and that traitor feeling that you get from the Emperor's Children, and that those fallen warriors I really like. And the Paragon of Excellence is also one that like I aesthetically, or not aesthetic, I really like the idea of your warlord. They see what's happening, they're going to break, decide that no, we're not going to break. And not only are you like gathering your courage, but you're better because of it. And that's such a like Space Marine against the odds. No, you're not breaking me, I'm going to break you.
Sorry, I was muted. That's really cool. I like how many of the rules in this game really, join mechanics and lore and really let you put yourself in the place of the Horus Heresy. I think that's one of the things that people really like about this game. So we're going to talk about the Emperor's Children Rites of War. They've got two, the Maru Skara and the Third Company Elite. And one of those is trader only. The other one you can, have with basically anyone. So Brady, why don't you tell us a little bit about these Rites of War, about how they play, and is there one of them that you think people would particularly lean for?
So again, the lore part of me, I am so in love with the Company Elite. It just feels like I like Fabius Bile. Like when I remember reading Fulgrim, the fourth book in the Heresy, it's like by far and away one of my favorite books, and I just love thinking about those, like taking the Astartes form and changing it and mutating it, and it's so unique to the Emperor's Children. It's one of those ones of, even if it's not the most powerful, which I still think it actually is quite good Rite of War, just being able to give everyone those augmentations, I'm just sold from a fluff perspective on that one.
Yeah, honestly, so if you have played in the previous editions, the Company Elite is one that was in the previous edition. Obviously, I'm a big fan of that in the way that you do get to run the Cacophony. You've got the ability to add surgical augmentation across the board. It's a lot of fun. But for me, I do like the Maru Skara, sorry. And the reason I like this is because it really does build towards that perfect strike, that perfect attack that you could do, with the ability to take units, outflank them, control when you outflank them, and the rest of your army is moving at +1 movement. You can get your guys into position and then outflank at the right moment, at the right time, to 1-2 punch your opponent out. I think that's very Emperor's Children as well. They did a great job with these Rites of War, but personally, I would love to do that because you have to take some time, think about your battle plan, and set up that strike, that lethal strike.
I really like the Maru Skara because it feels like when you get that +1 movement, that puts you over a break point at getting +1 to your charges too, which is pretty strong. But again, the Third Company Elite, everyone loves Fabulous Bill. So Fabulous Bill and his circus of mutated warriors is always a hit. And speaking of, let's talk a little bit about the Armoury of the Emperor's Children. Now, they're a little unusual compared to the other factions because their Armoury, quote unquote, does include some special weapons, but it also includes some special surgeries that they can get. So, Mike, why don't you tell us about those?
This is just such a fun part about the Emperor's Children, and honestly, if you're reading through these and the little floor pieces, you should really excited about to play this kind of army. But the surgical augmentations are such a unique buff to your units, particularly starting out. It says character units, but if you've noticed already, getting them to other units in your army are definitely possible. Sonic Shriekers are going to be kind of the hands down easiest one to take. I think that's going to be a big default for a lot of people for a lot of good reasons. I mean, a penalty 1 to all hits is huge. But I think one of the ones that people are going to miss is the Sonic Lance. I think it would be a lot of fun to use that, having Phoenix Terminators coming out of a transport, using the Sonic Lance, getting that 6-up breaching, pinning, and then charging a unit is really going to be pretty spectacular to see. I'm happy to see they added the Phoenix Rapier for their weapons. Rapiers seem much more dueling to me than spears, so fluff-wise, I like seeing it. But if I was taking one of these weapons, the Phoenix Spear is the way to go, in my opinion. It is the +2 strength, and that reach is just huge. So as I said, being able to compound that ability to raise your initiative, well, here's another chance to add to your initiative with that reach 1.
Yep, I think you really hit the nail on the head on the Sonic Shrieker is such a good default, but there is an argument for the Sonic Lance, because with Strength 2, you're going to be wounding most things in the game on 6s, but you have that breaching 6 anyway, so once you're fishing for that 6, so you want that on probably a 10-man squad and 10-man higher. I wouldn't want to put that in too many 5-man squads, because you're fishing pretty hard and you're not statistically likely to get that 6. What I really like about the power weapons for the Phoenix weapons is they don't cost anything for your character to upgrade to that, which I really like, because they are essentially just very slightly better versions of their, like, a power sword. The spear doesn't have a really good equivalent, but I like that it's just, no, just take these. They have a lot of them. This is iconic for the army. Take it and don't worry about it. Where some legions, it's like, oh, here's a 20-point upgrade, and you really start thinking, do I want to take this really cool legion ability? No, just take it for Emperor's Children and embrace, what your army is good at.
All right, so the Emperor's Children, in addition to having all of that cool war gear, they've also got a unique console, the Phoenix Warden. That's 30 points. That's quite a bit, but it sounds like it gives them some neat tricks. So, Brady, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Phoenix Warden and if you'd ever take one?
Oh, 100%. Skill unmatched is the big rule you're getting from this, which is one of those really nice things we've seen a lot, especially for characters, which is pick which buff you want, but you get it every time you fight. A perfect guard and a perfect strike can either make your weapon skill better or make your weapon skill better or your opponent's worse, for the low price of 1 attack, which will potentially keep you alive when you're in duels with potentially extremely dangerous characters. A perfect fury is just really good if you just need to get a lot of attacks through on more of those rank and file, and you will just pull yourself an Iron Halo, which is another for free, which is just a fantastic piece of war gear. We're going to see skill unmatched show up several times, and I think it's a really powerful rule that you're going to want as many times in your army as you can get it.
I definitely don't disagree. I mean, one, you do have to take the this Saturnian if you do take the Maruskara. However, I think the Living Icon one is also a great ability, but the skill unmatched is just, it's going to be a big game changer for a lot of combats against combat heavy armies, in my opinion. And it does add a unique flavor to the army in that, once again, as you're trying to reach that perfection concept, you have to micromanage this a little bit. This is you paying attention to who has this rule, which one's going to be the best for that combat versus the best opponent. And it adds a unique flavor that other armies don't really have, in that you're micromanaging down to the point of one character. And if you're familiar with challenges, this can get kind of tedious, because how you fight challenges can make or break it. This adds a whole new layer for this army, which adds to the flavor, but adds to the challenge.
I also think the free Iron Halo that Brady mentioned is kind of low-key a huge deal here, because when you're buying this on a console, consoles normally only have a refractor field unless they're not even Tartarus, Cataphractii armor. So they only have that 5-up invul, and this is a way of getting, a 4-up invul on a character who normally can't get one. So I think that's pretty cool. And of course, I think it would be pretty easy to use one of those really gorgeous Emperor's Children Praetor models that we talked about as a Phoenix Warden instead. So now, though, we're going to talk about the big man himself, the beautiful boy, Fulgrim. 425 points. Like all Primarchs, he's pretty hefty. But what does he do? Do you think he's going to show up most of the time? And what kind of effect does he have on the table, Mike?
Beautiful boy. Be careful what you say around the be Blood Angels fans, they might take offense to that. However, yes, he is pretty hot in my opinion, especially when it comes to on the page looking straight at his stat line first. He moves fast. He's one of the fastest Primarchs. He's got one of the best weapon skills, one that even matches Horus Ascendant, and then his initiative's 8 out the gate. He's built to really be deadly in combat. I mean, he has a 2-up, 3-up in melee attacks versus a 4-up against all other wounds. However, I think where he's important to bring and why I would bring him is not to do duels with other Primarchs. And that's going to be a big challenge for a lot of people to avoid that, because he's got the weapons to do it. Both the Fireblade and the Blade of Lair are good weapons, but the Sublime Swordsman is what tells me he needs to be going and crunching through elite units in the other army. For a characteristic initiative of 8, he's going to be getting a lot of additional attacks. So he's going to be able to go into hordes of, 4-up initiative, 5-up initiative, getting +3, +4 attacks on his already hefty 6 attacks. It just seems like to me, if I was bringing him, I'd be looking to hunt down all the other army's elite units, the ones that they don't want to see cut away in a turn, and Fulgrim's going to be able to do it without blinking an eye.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but I believe Sudden Strike, which he has, will also benefit him in this situation. But I would have to redouble check Sudden Strike to see if it modifies your characteristic or not. One of the things I also really like about Fulgrim, he sits in a similar part to me that Dorn did, which is his Warlord trait is very, very good, just as a base ability to buff your army, with a similar idea of just making it harder to get yourself pinned, harder to fail morale. And that for me is such a big force multiplier, because there's always, again, he moves 8 and he's going to probably tie himself in with a Tartaros Terminator squad, to keep him alive. So he still is somewhat quote unquote slow. So I always look at these Primarchs and go, what do you do if in the absolute worst case scenario they just tie me down by throwing tax squads at me and don't let me run around? Well, Fulgrim is still going to get a lot of value because you're not pinning my stuff. You're not making my models run away, and they're winning combat even easier as long as they can see Fulgrim.
All right, it sounds like he's both good in combat and good when he's not in combat. So let's talk about his bestest buddies, his bodyguard retinue. Oh, actually, no, sorry. We normally do special characters first. Okay, I'm going to re-record that. So it sounds like he's pretty good when he's in combat, and he's pretty good when he's not in combat, which is a good place to be. So now let's talk about his right-hand man, his second in command, Lord Commander Eidolon. I remember hating this guy when I was reading the Horus Heresy books. He's a total jerk. So does that translate on the tabletop, Brady?
100%. His Warlord trait is Prideful Onslaught, and that lives up to that, pride cometh before the fall. I think he's an absolute monster and someone who you'd really want to keep your units away from, again, especially because not only are his weapons good, but that Prideful Onslaught, Warlord trait is one of those ones I look at and go, yeah, I'd be willing to take an HQ slot and pay a little bit of that character premium, because this rule is really good and will force my opponent to play differently.
He's definitely a jerk indeed. Brady said it great, but there's a lot of strong characteristics to Commander Eidolon. One, he comes with his own little death screen, which I think is just entertaining. But the big thing I like about him, and that strike at initiative when he charges for the weapon he carries, is the Brutal 2. He's going to do a lot of damage, and if you can get him to his rival unit, he's going to be just devastating. So getting a charge on him before he charges you is really crucial. However, with weapon skill 6, it's going to be difficult to really bring him down unless you have another hero to take him. The other thing, though, is he does come with a jetpack. So who he's running with is going to be different, because you can no longer give the jump packs to the Phoenix, the Palatine blades, from my understanding. So the big thing with him is going to be he's going to have to go with a assault squad or Yeah, just about. So his retinue isn't going to be as powerful as some of the other characters or even a Praetor can take.
Sounds like that's a balancing factor. But we're going to now look at one half of one of the bitterest rivalries in the whole Horus Heresy, Captain Saul Tarvitz. I know that, we talked about him a little bit earlier. He's a pretty great character. He's the real hero of the Fulgrim book and really one of the heroes of the Heresy, in that he warned the Loyalist legions on Istvan III that they were about to be purged and gave them a chance to fight back, which dealt a blow to Horus's rebellion before it even really got off the ground. So, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about Tarvitz, how he plays, and does he live up to that heroic legend that exists around him?
My man. Now, after one of my second or third times reading the initial Horus Heresy trilogy books, Saul Tarvitz really jumped out on the page to me. I do enjoy his character and his fluff, and on the tabletop, he brings that as well. I think he's got a very unique ability with Defiant Unto Death, which definitely can help the army, giving Fearless special rule, and if you're playing him wisely, he's just going to be near an objective. But I do really enjoy the Brother Betrayed. He's going to go looking for other Emperor's Children. And what this means to me is it's going to make playing something like the Istvan 3 campaign or missions, or playing through that concept, is going to be interesting and entertaining. It's going to be fun. Even if you're doing Emperor's Children against Emperor's Children, you're going to get something out of it and have a little bit different play. And not to mention, his Charnel Broadsword is a beast of a weapon, rending 4 up, duelist edge, mastercrafted, and then if he does get to go fight an Emperor's Children, he's at +1 weapon skill, strength, and toughness. The dude brings a lot to the table, in my opinion, especially in the right circumstances.
100%. And what I really like about these characters that are like the opposite loyalty, is they're statted really well and they're pointed pretty appropriately. But it isn't going to, at least for me, when I read him and see all his rules, I'm not going to go, wow, I'm wrong by building Emperor's Children around being a traitor because he's so powerful. He's clearly the best character in this, in this book. He isn't that, and it really comes to me where it's like, I'm going to play him to tell an interesting story, to tell the story of Istvan, or like, well, spoiler warnings of what potentially could have happened afterwards. But I really like that they walk those lines with these characters of, I want to bring them. I'm not going to feel bad about bringing them, but I'm also not really feeling like I need to bring them and change the entire Legion loyalty to gain some kind of power on the tabletop that I just wouldn't get anywhere else.
I really like that they've created loyal characters for traitor legions, and I think there might be some traitor characters for loyal legions. I'd have to look at that, but we'll see as we go through. And they always are adding new characters with PDFs and exemplary battles. But I just really like that aspect of the Heresy, being able to basically create any kind of army you want, because it truly was such a galaxy-shattering civil war that there was just about every combination of loyalties at pretty much some point during the Heresy. So now we're going to talk about the other half of that legendary rivalry, Captain Lucius. Not yet Lucius the Eternal. This is another 40k character who's found his way back to 30k, but maybe we're seeing him take that first step along the path of Slaanesh. So Brady, why don't you tell us a little bit about Lucius?
So he is, the one of the best swordsmen that I've ever come across, and the rules really do help show that. One of the things I really like about him is I think he's the only character, and I could be wrong about this, but I think he's the only character who has an option to reduce his points if you really need to find points somewhere else in your list. But yeah, he doesn't really help your units very much, but man, you're just gonna have him run around getting into challenge, and he will probably win almost all of those challenges.
Yeah, outside of maybe a chosen few like Sigismund, he really should be winning most of those challenges. I actually find him to be if I was running a Traitor Legion, I would bring him more often even than Eidolon. Yes, he doesn't really help the army. However, if he is in a challenge, giving Fearless is not a bad thing, is never a bad thing. But I think you're going to get a lot of your army of wanting to be in challenges, wanting to seek out that glory, and he is a perfect character to do so. I personally like his weapon 19 actually more than the Blade of the Lair. I feel it is a better weapon, but then again, as you said, there's a points difference that you can make, which I think is very interesting. And the Blade of the Lair clearly is not as good as 19, but I couldn't bring myself to not take that weapon personally. I think the Rending 3 and Murder Strike plus that Duelist Aegis is just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've actually. No, go on. Sorry, Brady.
I was gonna say that means you get them even cheaper because the blade is what's costing you most of the points.
Yeah, the blade is I think 35 points or 40 points by itself. No, it's 35 points. No, it is 40. I don't know how to do math. It is 40 points all by itself. It's a real hell of a weapon. I mean, it's AP2, wounds on 2s, reroll the hit, etc., etc. But it is a specialist weapon, so you actually have, you have one fewer attack if you take it, because if you get the close combat weapon, you get the extra attack. I've actually sort of diced up Lucius versus Tarvitz. It's surprisingly close, but this is exactly the fight Tarvitz was born for. Anyways, that's all the special characters, but there's a couple of really cool non-special character units that are really, I think, defining to how this army plays. So, Mike, can you tell us a bit about these Phoenix Terminators? It looks like that's the elite bodyguard of Fulgrim.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at first glance, I think a lot of people are going to look at this unit and kind of feel underwhelmed when it comes to them because they don't seem to have as big of a rule list. But I think their big advantage that you get from them is that skill unmatched and living icons. They just come with standard. So we talked about earlier, this is a big rules that do a lot. I think they're very important. Not to mention, you can add for 25 points, you can give the whole unit surgical augmentation, whether it be 5 or 10. And I think that's just going to turn this unit into one hell of a elite killer, as well as just anything that kind of gets in their way. I personally would just keep the Phoenix Spears as they are. You can't really touch them anyway. I really like this squad. I think they are a big must take for your army, particularly as a retinue for, say, a standard Praetor or hanging out with Fulgrim.
Yeah, what I love about specifically living icons, again, that gives you a 4-up invulnerable save. That gives you that Iron Halo. So what you basically get with these Terminators, and I think people may miss, is you get Cataphracti Terminators that can sweeping advance and can run. But more importantly, can sweeping advance, because they're still Tartaros, which is absolutely huge. And when you really need that skill unmatched, if you are hitting another elite Terminator unit with weapon skill 5, well, they're weapon skill 4 now. They're hitting you on 5s. It is such a stat sheet that is crammed with efficiencies, but nothing is. I wouldn't say anything is amazingly flashy. It's just at 30, basically 35 points a model is just so efficient for what you're getting for those points.
All right, and then we have kind of one step down from these guys, maybe in terms of their rank in the Legion, the Palatine Blade Squad. It's a whole squad of guys with Charnabal weapons. That's pretty sweet. Brady, can you tell us a little bit about the Palatine Blades and when you'd use them?
Yes, these are your a lot of legions have their specific flavor of veteran. Again, you get your skill unmatched here, which is really, really nice, which is a big leg up over other Legion veterans. Your weapon skill and ballistic skill 5, so you're just as good at shooting as you are in fighting. Where I'll be taking these guys is you can take them in larger squads. So if you are starting to take that surgical augment that I was mentioning earlier when you're trying to do what is its name? The Sonic Lance. These guys are really good for it because you can take that larger squad and get more chances to get the pinning, and then come in with your Chernobyl weapons. It's probably still worth it to spend the 5 points to upgrade to a Phoenix weapon. But you're not going to be super sad if you stay with Chernobyl weapons. I think if you're going to those larger squads, that 10-man, you're probably going to want to keep those Chernobyl weapons and save some points. But beyond that, they're just going to blend your things up at a lot cheaper of a rate than your Terminators.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You're not really going to be missing out if you run with the Charnel Sabers. If you want to take multiple squads of these and run them cheap, I do think they're a must, in my opinion, in most lists. And I think there's a potential with this squad. They're not going to be as survivable as the Terminators, but they're still 2 wounds. They're still 2 of armor. I actually think for points they will turn out to be better than the Terminators. Personally, particularly with that counter attack, they're always a threat. They're always going to be something to worry about. And if you bring the Phoenix Spears, you're looking at most of the time they're going to be fighting at initiative 6, so they're faster than pretty much anybody else on the table. And then you give them that sonic, the augmentation. As you said, you could take them with the lance. You're going to get a lot out of that. And once again, if you default just to the shriekers, you're going to be outmatching people in weapon skill and initiative. These guys are going to be incredible at headhunting other elite squads that you just want to see disappear. And I think there's going to be a lot of units that are going to struggle to fight this squad.
Yeah, it sounds like they really have a lot of options. It's a little weird that they have ballistic skill 5 when they've just got bolt pistols, but just means they're good at everything. But now I'm not going to say we've saved the best for last, certainly, because it sounds like when you're the Emperor's Children, everyone's the best. But I think we've certainly saved the most iconic for last. The Kakophoni Squad, the precursors to the Noise Marines. Probably one of the most iconic Emperor's Children squads that exists. Mike, can you tell us all about these guys? I hope that they're good enough that everyone's going to want to take them because they're super cool.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they have their own Rite of War, right? And they bring more to the table now than they did in the previous edition, in my opinion. And they brought a lot then, too. Right out the gate, one of the things I notice is they're fearless. You can never downplay that. 2, they come standard kitted with the Shock Shriekers, or Sonic Shriekers. So you don't have to pay the points there. And a big thing that they didn't have before, that they do now, is the Sergeant or Orchestrator can bring a close combat weapon. So now they're just a little bit more of a threat when you're thinking about charging them and getting into combat with them. He could take a challenge and he's going to do well on it. And then lastly, the weapon is just brutal. Range 36, strength 6. I mean, you're getting pinning, shell shock 1, defogate, assault 3. These weapons are going to do some major damage and a lot of hurt that make other Volkite weapons and pinning weapons just look shameful.
So just to add something that wasn't said is leadership 10. Just randomly, these guys, they're fearless, but they're also leadership 10. So even if you get them into combat, which I think fearless would ignore anyway, but that is insane. But I think you go down to the Kakophoni, and you just see the rules of pinning, shell shock, and deflagrate, and it's just I take a sniper, the console sniper, just to get access to shell shock and pinning. You can take an entire unit of shell shock pinning. You can take several units of shell shock pinning. You could just end this entire conversation with shell shock pinning and move on, because that's all you need to read. These guys are amazing. Take 2.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear that the Kakophoni are definitely worth taking, because if you're playing Emperor's Children and you're not playing Kakophoni, you're either a loyalist, which is pretty suspect, or I don't know, maybe you're just one of those people who says they don't listen to any kind of music, which is a little weird. But that's the Emperor's Children. It sounds like they got a lot of really cool options. Maybe a tilt towards melee, but there's certainly no slouches at range, especially those Kakophoni. So, Brady, can you tell us a little bit about how these guys just play on the table? What's the sort of what if you're running Emperor's Children, what do you expect your army to do, and what do you think are going to be your main strategies going into a game?
Yeah, one of the big ways I think about building Emperor's Children, I know we talked about their unique Rites of War, which are very powerful, but there's also Pride of the Legion, because your Terminators are just so much better than other Legion Terminators because you're getting that extra initiative. A lot of the builds I've started looking at have a lot of Kakophoni squads and then a lot of Terminators, and that is essentially the main kind of the list, where Terminator squads are running up and beating anything that come across them to death. and the Kakophoni Squads are just hanging back, backing them up, and preventing the opponent from really getting into your lines and potentially stopping them from charging altogether because their guns have shell shock and pinning. So that would be what I'd be looking for, is just making sure you're always getting the charges by pinning units that want to charge you, and then just using Terminators to just absolutely destroy your opponent. Like, their Thunder Hammers don't get to swing at you if you just kill them with your Thunder Hammers.
No, absolutely. There's a lot to say for the benefits of this army that it brings to even just its standard units, not even its elite units. Me personally, I'm going to be looking for building that, for lack of a better term, perfect strike. I want that perfect spear thrust out of this army, that 1-2 punch when I get them on the field, get them into the right combats, into the right positions to maximize on their abilities. And I think it's just gonna be a lot of fun to run them that way. There's a lot to be had here, a lot of fluff, and whether you play Loyalist or Traitor, you're gonna get a lot out of this army. Plus, it's beautiful to paint. And for those of you who do decide to invest in this army, there's gonna be a lot of players out there who hate me for saying this, but don't forget to look at the Sun Killers in the online release from GW on some of the previous units that they had. They're one of the best heavy support units in the game. But please have fun with this army. It is a blast, and go for that perfect strike.
Well, we can't leave people without giving them at least some idea of how to fight this. So, Mike, if you're running into Emperor's Children on the other side of the table, if your regular opponent brings them and they've been kind of kicking your butt for a while, what would you say is the list of biggest weaknesses and the best way to fight against them?
At the end of the day, you're going to get a better fight either if you're a long-range army and you can get them pinned in place, or start whittling away with those at some of those more vital units that make this list or their army so good. At the end of the day, though, the easiest answer, in my opinion, is either you can pin them and charge them, or find a way to make them waste their charges on units that aren't important and then countercharge them. Take away their ability to get that +1 initiative as best as possible. Endurance is going to help you a lot here over lethality as well. And you just got to be careful about their charge. At the end of the day, that's where they're going to get their money, and that's where you have to be careful.
So many armies can just say the answer is Dreadnoughts, just because Dreadnoughts are so good this edition. But I actually think Dreadnoughts, kind of to what Mike was alluding to, are such a good answer because they can eat that charge, probably live, and then once the Emperor's Children are locked in combat on that second round, they're basically like every other Legion. So surviving into that second round, or making sure you get the charge off on them and then can keep them locked in, will give you a lot of advantages, because you're basically taking away some of their strongest rules, especially that extra initiative. So focus on making them move in the wrong spots. Again, they're all about that perfect spear thrust. And if you can confuse them, if you can screen, you have that 20-man tactical squad that you push forwards that makes them think like, oh, do I want to go here? Maybe they spend some time moving around it. Well, that's probably slowed them down enough to give you the advantage you need to eventually win the game, even if they charge and kill the rest of your army. This is an army, in my opinion, that is going to, like I said at the very beginning, is going to be so skill dependent, because all these rules are strong if you use them correctly, and if you don't pick the correct choice when you are using your skill unmatched, you lose so much power. If you're getting charged, you lose so much. You don't get a Legion rule, essentially. So really making sure that you are playing a better game than them will almost always give you a strong advantage. But if they know more, they may just be unstoppable against you.
Well, that definitely sounds like it matches the lore. Now, I really like these guys. I love to hate them, basically. I really think they're some of the best villains of the Heresy. And I also really like now that we've seen we're getting a new round of Primarch models with that gorgeous new Horus model. I mean, we all expect that we're going to get Snake Demon Fulgrim, right? Like it's almost inevitable at this point. So the Emperor's Children are great. They have a lot to offer. You can play them as these vile, despicable traitors, but it sounds like there's also some really cool narrative options to play them as the betrayed loyalists of Eastfon. So we're going to keep doing this series. We're going to look at all the different legions one at a time, traitor and loyalist. So we hope that this video has helped you understand a little bit more about how to play the third legion. And if you have been on the fence, maybe you're deciding to pick up some of the purple guys. And if your opponent plays them, maybe at least you have a better sense of what's about to hit you. So until next time, this is the Danger Planet. If you like our video, please give us a comment, like the video, subscribe, and join our Discord in the description where we talk about Horus Heresy and a bunch of other great games. And if you have any comments on the Horus Heresy Legions and which one you'd like to see us do next, let us know. Thanks for coming by the Danger Planet.